So last weekend I was playing the Legendary Pauper Gauntlet, hoping to record a video for a Hlalu deck, which was a hybrid of Rally and Pilfer. Unfortunately, my deck got stumped 9 times by Invade, and the 2 games I did win had concedes way too early to be proper videos. So this did make me wonder about how powerful Invade would have been in this gauntlet. And then after viewing all of the Daedra cards and Invade cards, I realised how pretty much none of their material had been hindered whatsoever. So an already strong archetype was made even stronger, which gave me the idea to make this video, which is pretty much discussing why Invade is so strong and why a lot of people aren't big fans of it. So, just to kind of get everyone up to speed and make sure everyone knows exactly how Invade works. Whenever you activate Invade for the first time, an Oblivion Gate will appear in your shadow lane, taking up one of your unit positions, which will kind of be the first and one of the few nerfs of Invade that you do lose a unit spot. However, as this thing levels up, it gets much stronger. So at the first level, it's immune to silence, it's permanently shackled, so it can never be attacking, and has 0 power and 4 health. And when you summon a Daedra, it will gain 1 additional health. And when another card activates Invade on its ability, this gate will level up. You can never have multiple gates. So when it gets to level 2, it will be giving your Daedra that you summon +1/+1. And at level 3, your Daedra in your hand will cost 1 less. At level 4, whenever you summon a Daedra, it will gain 1 random keyword, level 5, 2 random keywords, etc, etc, keep on going up in keywords until level 11, which is technically the max, where whenever a Daedra is summoned, it will gain all 8 keywords in the game, and they will also cost 1 less. And to remind you of all those keywords, that's Breakthrough, Charge, Drain, Guard, Lethal, Regenerate, Rally, and Ward. And as this gate levels up, it will also be gaining health, so at level 2 it will be at level 6. And we'll keep on gaining 2 health each level indefinitely, so in theory you could get this to like level 1,000,000 if you had the cards for it. But at level 11, where you'll be getting all the abilities possible, it will have 24 health. And when a gate is in this sort of power level, you've pretty much lost the game unless you've got some form of action which is going to just clear an entire row. Because any card they'll be summoning will be buffed by +1/+1, have 8 keywords, and will just be a massive pain in your butt to get rid of. But anyway, now that you know all about how the Oblivion Gate portal works, let's get into the cards which actually cause invades. So I've managed to divide these cards into 5 different groups. We have the early game cards, the draw power cards, the swarm cards, the control cards, and the ones which don't really fit into any of them. So starting with the early game cards, these are the ones that you could use very easily in your first 3 turns and are just nice to get a little bit of a body on the board or just start your combos going. I was going to make it so it was only the first 2 turns, but I thought, as you know, if you go second you'll have the Ring of Magicka. I'll also throw an Invasion Marauder. We also have the draw power cards, which are ones which will add something to your hand when they are played. And I've just looked back at this and realised that Unexpected Arrival is in draw power. It's meant to be in swarm. I apologise for that. I can't really sort it all out now because I've just done all the stuff for it. But yeah, again, apologies. Unexpected Arrival is meant to be in swarm. But anyway, moving on to swarm, these are the cards which will just be summoning something when you activate them, so you invade and get something else on the board. And then we also have control, which is going to be the more defensive versions of the cards, either destroying your opponent's units or making it harder for your opponent to get to your Oblivion Gate. So these are the ones which you'd probably kind of get the most annoyed by. And then finally we have the others, which are just the ones that don't fit into any of the other categories. So starting at looking at the early game cards, Oblivion Invasion is the only one here which is just an action and won't put down a unit. This is kind of very balanced because it's just invading, nothing else is happening. It's a very simple card. However, when we move on to the other units, these are very good because they are low cost, which means that even if you're playing them late game when your gate's quite a high level, they'll be gaining the effects of your current gate anyway. So they'll probably be gaining keywords, buffs, and the thing that makes these kind of fair is that none of them will pick up the invade bonus that they set off themselves. So none of these will suddenly gain 1 health or gain a keyword or anything like that if your gate wouldn't have already done that. A key thing to note here is that there's one for strength, there's 2 cards for intelligence, and there's 1 card for willpower. And Guildsworn is the most common version of Invade that you will see out there. And that's mainly because it kind of just gains everything, really, if you go with that. Although there are some really good endurance cards with Daedra, they are all very much late game cards, which you'll be seeing later, and agility just doesn't have enough of a kit to do with Invade to be played, in my opinion. But it can still work, it's just you're very much limiting what you can do with the Daedra side of things. The next cards we have to look at are going to be the draw power cards. Again, I'm sorry that Unexpected Arrival is meant to be here, or here it's meant to be with Swarm, because it's summons, not draws, but I'll talk about that one a bit when I get to Swarm. So, Daedric Incursion is very good because it will be drawing something from your deck, which is Finning, as well as invading. The same with Great Sigilstone, but it's a bit slower, although you do get a buff when you finally draw, and you get free invades from it, which definitely makes up for its slower playstyle. And as Invade has plenty of options to do in these times, like all the time when you're building things up, it doesn't really matter too much that it's slow. Occult Rite Master's a bit of a kind of worse card to go with, just because it requires an item build for Invade, and there's very few items that work well with these cards. So when it comes to draw power, you'll probably see 3 copies of Daedric Incursion and a Great Sigilstone in most Invade decks, because it's an excellent way of them getting through their own deck very quickly and efficiently, while Rite Master is probably only going to be used in some sort of interesting variant versions of Invade, as you won't usually be seeing enough items. And even if you do see kind of the best cards that work with items, they won't usually be giving items to Rite Master, and because you have to choose the items on him, again, yeah, it's very rare to see. And as we are moving on to Swarm, we'll now just quickly mention Unexpected Arrival. It's just quite nice to get out a quick card alongside your gate, with it being kind of usually weak, but it will kind of gain a few buffs depending on what the level is. We also have Forces of Destruction and Invasion Party, which will invade a bunch and then summon a bunch of Daedra, and then Invasion Party can either summon 3 scamps, invade 3 times, or anywhere in between, so say 1 scamp, 2 invades, 2 scamps, 1 invade, whatever you want, and you can choose the order these go off. The thing that makes these cards really good, the Daedra that are summoned after the gate has been invaded, meaning that all these cards will be gaining the buffs from your current gate, no matter how strong it is. So unlike the early game Daedra, in fact any of the other Daedra that have any sort of invade synergy, these cards will actually be gaining the buffs from the card that they belong to, which is just really, really strong, and will make these cards even stronger that you're summoning. Now I understand that a scamp isn't very strong as a 1-1, but when you think that minimum, let's say you invade once, you're still getting, 2 scamps which have been buffed, which is pretty good. Anyway, onto Control. This is where you can kind of see some of the cards which are more used in defensive manners. We've got Blast from Oblivion, which is not only a prophecy, but will invade and then damage a creature equal to your Oblivion Gate's level to that creature that you choose. So this can be quite nice if you've got a high level gate to just pretty much remove something for a free cost or on a prophecy. And as you're getting invade as well, it means that a lot more synergies can be popping off. We've got Sigil Keeper, which will give your gate a ward, which is just ridiculously good for when your opponent's not got lethal, or even if it does have lethal actually, because it means they've got to pop the ward first, or if they haven't got any actions to get past your kind of walls and stuff. Giving it wards just means that it's a bit safer. The Crisis Begins is just like your generic destroy a creature card, but instead of it having a kind of other buff, it just invades, as most just flat out destroy creature cards are usually 5 cost, but they're made up to 6 if they've got something else, hence the 6 cost here. And then Mankar Cameron, he's just good at making it so your opponent can't flail their weak units at your gate every single turn, because they'll have full power to kind of hit back at your opponent's units. So next we have the other cards which didn't really fit into anything else. Dremora Adept and Widow Daedra. Both of these cards have the kind of formula of when something happens, they will invade. Dremora Adept is obviously significantly better, and hence the reason it's a legendary is because if your Oblivion Gate's high enough level to be just giving out keywords anyway, you're basically just going to be invading by summoning this, and it's already got kind of decent stats for its cost. Right, and finally, before we get on to the armies of Daedra, we have the synergy cards, which are the ones which have their own effects, which go off when you invade. Now, again, these cards all fall into the attributes of Guildsworn. There's 2 for Strength, 1 for Intelligence, 1 for Willpower, and I'd say all of these, except Zealot, are very viable to run. Zealot is, of course, alright, but it's just not as strong as the others, as whenever you invade, it will put a Scamp in your hand at the end of your turn, which is very good. It's just a Scamp isn't really strong enough to make this a kind of viable play, although it could be argued that this is a better choice than Agent of Mehrunes Dagon, because Agent of Mehrunes Dagon is a lot more about snowballing, while Zealot is just about adding cards to your hand that you can play at a later date when your gate's much stronger for buffs. There's also Mythic Dawn Acolyte, which at the end of your turn will deal 2 damage if you've invaded. This can either be to your opponent's face or their units, and because you can choose either their face, the units, you actually get the choice of everything that your opponent has. Well, this is just very strong, because, you know, if there's nothing your opponent's side to hit, you hit their face, and as you can always choose, it doesn't mean that you're having to worry about hitting the wrong unit, and Keeper of the Gates would just mean invading happens twice, and getting through those levels twice as fast is just a bit ridiculous. And the thing is, although all the cards I've mentioned so far are really strong, I haven't actually really shown you that many of the Daedric cards which are going to be receiving all these buffs. And I'm now going to show you some of the strongest cards from each attribute that go alongside Invade. So starting off with Agility, I've just grabbed every single Daedra there is, because there really isn't too much of a choice. Crazed Hunger is fine, to be honest. Even with Invade, it at most becomes a free with Charge and every other keyword, so it's not too great. Daedric Titan does become very strong, however, because with a strong gate, you've always got something in the shadow lane, so you're just worrying about getting something in the field lane, and once that's happened, your opponent can no longer target this unit of actions, and it will also gain Drain, which means that it can kind of get out of control very, very quickly, just because you can easily summon units, especially if you've got a few scamps from the swarm mechanics, to kind of keep this unit to be immune from actions. If it's hiding behind a guard, it's going to be doing Drain, so you'll be staying very high on health and not being worried about losing through that. And the fact that your opponent can't really reach it through any means that it's just 6 points, which are very strong. And Spider Daedra, in a best case scenario, can be a 23-point swing in one turn if you've got a max level gate guaranteeing all of your Spider Daedras to get Charge and Breakthrough and Drain. So that's 23 damage either directly to your opponent or through Breakthrough and Ward and Lethal to destroy your opponent's field, and you'll be gaining 23 health, which is a bit ridiculous. And despite all that, that's probably one of the more tamer options for Invade. So moving on to Endurance, which is a good choice, but the issue is all the cards are very high cost, meaning that it's all about the late game, and quite a bit of Invade can actually be all about the early game. So Dark Seducer is just very good on its own because of its ability, and it's already starting with 2 keywords, so it doesn't really need Invade, but obviously alongside it, having its cost reduced, getting some more keywords like maybe Lethal or Ward can make it even stronger. The Gatekeeper, of course, slowing down your opponent. Put this in the lane of your Oblivion Gate, and then it means that your opponent's got to spend even more resources trying to reach it if they don't have an action. Zivkin Bannerlord or Banelord. This is also very strong because it will weaken all your opponent's units to 1 health in the lane, meaning some small units like your Scamps, if they get Charge, can just destroy something incredibly strong, say like an Alduin or a Parthenax. Flesh Atronach late game, of course, if you've got a lot in your graveyard, especially if you've been swarming out a few created units like Scamps, Atronachs, anything like that. Ridiculously strong already, and once it gets keywords, even stronger. And Iron Atronach has the same kind of issues that Daedric Titan will have, meaning that your opponent can't target it with actions, which is the main counter to Invade. Okay, so moving into Intelligence, we have Piercing Twilight, which is just great for kind of banishing your opponent's strongest cards, especially if you manage to get rid of something like Fell the Mighty or Piercing Javelin. because that will mean your opponent's got a lot less to deal with your gates and all your other strong units. Attuned Daedra Dremora is kind of decent. It's just nice to kind of gain some more keywords. It's not the strongest thing out there, but it's still very nice to see. Seething Flesh Golem is on here because of the one time that I managed to get it with charge and lethal, and I don't even need to say any more. It just made the lane completely unplayable for my opponent until he found a Piercing Javelin. Dremora Adept can be really good when you've got a high level gate because of what I mentioned earlier, with it just invading a bunch more depending on how high your gate is already, making it even stronger and having higher health, so your opponent needs to rely more on lethal or actions to get rid of it. And Valkyna's Mage is probably the other best choice for intelligence, because there's not actually that many Daedra with intelligence if we ignore the Atronax. That is, I'm going with cards that you have to put in your deck here. So yeah, intelligence is a few good choices. Next we move on to strength, which has some very nice and very powerful cards. Blast Crazed Daedroth is the first, which is a card that I think alone is actually very good, very enjoyable to play, and great to see. One that I was very excited to put in my decks when the collection was coming out, as it's just a nice bit of draw power and will almost always be able to go off. Kindreath Champion, however, is a card which is very, very strong, especially in this archetype, because if you get it to have a bit more health, that just means it's more health to damage your opponent back with, and if this gets something like Breakthrough or even Regenerate, you'll be getting a lot more opportunities to damage your opponent. The reason why Lumbering Ogrim is here is just because he has very great stats anyway, and if you have some sort, or if it gets guard, or kind of, you know, you summon it in the field lane, the fact that it can't get cover, its weakness, just is made redundant. And the other two Daedra that we have, Reeve and Dremora, are just there because they can do some insane amounts of damage and have a crazy amount of power when you invade enough that they start getting keywords. We also need to cover Willpower, because obviously Guildsworn's the most common versions, and Willpower brings the issue of healing, as almost all of these cards will make it so your opponent just struggles to hurt your, you know, your face, and then Golden Saint abuses that by doubling up on the numbers of the cards you get, and then when they start getting a bunch more keywords or buffs, it becomes very crazy for your opponent to deal with. And, you know, Golden Initiate, Dremora Channeler, these are prophecies. Fling them out the deck if, you know, your runes get broken. But obviously, as you can't confirm that, they're not too busted. They're both cards that I very enjoy running, but in Invade they're just so much stronger. Auroran Sentry is also great because it just put it down as a wall, and it's kind of your version of a Dark Seducer for Willpower, so you can kind of get a slightly worse version of Dark Seducer, but at least it's in, you know, Guildsworn, so it doesn't require you to kind of ruin your deck by going into Endurance or something, rather than one of your preferred attributes. And Shrine Guardian will slow down your opponent like hell if they use charge. And this joke was made by the Morrowind gang. He isn't gentle. He says he'll be gentle, but he's not. I don't care what he says by that rock, he is not gentle. The last two cards I want to look at are the two neutral options. That's Barbus, the adorable doggo, who is just great for either being, well, he's whatever you need him to be. He's versatile, because he can either have guard, he can either give you draw power, or he can go aggro if your opponent's close to being finished. So he's just a great card to have. And finally we get on to my nightmares, the Siege Crawler. One time I had a game where on turn 10 they summoned a Siege Crawler with a very high level gate and was able to witness a 10-10, 16-16 with charge, breakthrough, drain and ward. Oh, and regenerate, my apologies. Yeah, it wasn't fun. And because of that, I think the card has scarred me to life. But anyway, in conclusion, the reason why Invade is so strong is because it can do everything. It's a mid-range deck which doesn't need to kind of worsen itself to kind of be flexible. It's got every bit of versatility it needs to be able to do whatever it wants. And I'm going to end this video with a little story back from the days when I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In real life on a regular basis. A friend of mine came around my house with his new deck, which was a Performer Power Pendulum deck. Now this was back when pendulums were very, very new, and I had never seen them before. I had my trustworthy Blue Eyes White Dragon deck thinking, oh, this is going to be an easy match. He's got some weird concert monkeys. I'm going to win with my awesome dragons. And the issue I ran into was that his deck just outpaced me completely. And on our third or fourth game that we had, I did manage to summon my strongest units. But he had a setup where every turn he was just able to throw out units that I couldn't get past. And even though I was in my best possible scenario with my deck, I just couldn't get past the wall he was making. So it's that phrase of, you know, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. I just couldn't really do anything, and I ended up losing that game because I couldn't draw. So I think the issue with Invade here is that it's so much stronger because it's the newest thing that was added to Legends before the game unfortunately stopped development, that they weren't able to make a new or their final set of the year, which would probably have had cards which would have countered this a lot more. And as these cards haven't really been able to kind of have something else take over them, it means that when you look at those older cards with those older mechanics, they just don't kind of match up with these new cards. But I have just looked at how long this video is, and Jesus Christ, I've been waffling out a long one. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. If you have, please like and subscribe. It massively helps out the channel. And tell me if there's anything else that you'd like me to go over in Legends or any other card game really, as I really enjoy making just videos like this where I sit down and talk to a screen for a bit. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed. Hope this has kind of made you see or how Invade is quite a strong mechanic and what makes it so strong. And other than that, I hope to see you guys next time.